These days, winter is just an excuse to put on a nice sweater and turn up the heat. If we're cold, we simply press a button on the thermostat or order hot coffee for delivery. We've forgotten what it means to truly fear a drop in temperature.
In the Middle Ages, winter wasn't just a season. It was a ruthless serial killer.
For a peasant in the 14th century, the cold season was a true test of endurance. They had no central heating, thermal underwear, or heated sleeping bags. A mistake in preparing for the night cost not just a mild cold, it cost a life. People developed a strict system of rules that allowed them to survive until spring. Today, these methods seem wild, strange, and completely illogical to us. Modern science is only now beginning to understand the genius of these medieval strategies. They instinctively understood the laws of thermodynamics long before physicists even coined the term. It's time to open the old archives and see exactly how our ancestors cheated death. Sounds like the plot of a suspenseful movie, doesn't it? But this was their everyday reality, where every evening turned into a battle for survival. Sit back and get comfortable, preferably closer to the radiator.
Now we'll examine 10 forgotten rules that saved people's lives every winter night.
The modern world has taught us to value personal space above all else. Everyone should have their own separate room, a huge bed, and a soft personal blanket. In the Middle Ages, such excessive luxury was a one-way ticket to the afterlife. Sleeping in complete solitude during a harsh winter was considered sheer madness. The system of survival dictated its strict rules to every social class. If you have a girlfriend, you surely know how wonderful it is to fall asleep together on a cold night. For us today, this is an expression of tenderness, homey coziness, and simple comfort. For a medieval person, it was pure physics and the harsh mathematics of daily survival. The human body is a powerful biological furnace that constantly emits thermal energy.
In those days, people valued every degree of warmth they received from their bedmate.
At complete rest, a healthy adult generates about 100 watts of heat. Two people under a single thick woolen blanket produce 200 watts of pure energy. Now imagine a typical family of 5 in a single wide bed. That's already a fully fledged small heater with a capacity of half a kilowatt. Such a collective heat source made it possible to stay alive even in the bitterest cold. Peasants built huge wooden beds for precisely this compelling reason. Parents, small children, and sometimes visiting relatives would huddle tightly together there. Often, pets were placed at their feet for additional warmth. Sounds like a real nightmare for a typical introvert, doesn't it? But by morning, all the introverts were still alive and relatively warm. Science today calls this the most efficient distribution of thermal mass. Our ancestors called it simple, common sense. The more bodies huddled together in a single pile, the less heat escaped into the freezing air of the room. It was their personal biological climate control in the absence of central heating.
People understood that being alone on a freezing night was tantamount to a death sentence.
Sometimes in roadside inns, ordinary travelers had to share a bed with complete strangers. You weren't paying for a private room at all. You were paying for a spot next to a stranger's warm body. Innkeepers crammed as many people into a single bed as it could hold. The traveler had little choice: sleep with a snoring stranger or quickly freeze to death.
Right this way.
Most sensibly chose the former, despite the discomfort and disgust. Wealthy lords in their stone castles never slept in proud solitude either. Loyal servants often slept beside their luxurious beds to warm their masters with their own body heat. It was practically impossible to heat the vast halls of castles, even with the largest fireplaces. Your office job may seem tough, but at least you don't have to serve as a human hot water bottle for your boss. The Middle Ages set life's priorities very strictly and without sentimentality. So forget about any personal boundaries if you ever find yourself in the distant past. Your physical survival depended directly on how many people were breathing down your neck. The winner in this harsh game was always the one who slept right in the center of that human pile. It was always much cooler at the edges of the bed because of drafts and icy walls. Today we produce a bright flame with a simple flick of the finger on an ordinary lighter. For us, it's a matter of seconds requiring absolutely no effort or special skills. In the Middle Ages, Making fire was a long, complicated, and incredibly frustrating process. That is why a fire that accidentally went out in the dead of night was not just an inconvenience, but a real disaster. The entire rhythm of family life revolved around the small, tamed flame. Flint and steel didn't work nearly as perfectly as were often shown in movies. You had to strike sparks for a long time on special tinder, which had to be absolutely dry. Try finding something absolutely dry in a windswept medieval hut in damp November. It took a long time, and time at night was measured in lost degrees of warmth. Numb fingers were uncooperative, which made this important task even more difficult. People came up with a brilliant and simple solution. They simply never let the fire go out completely. At night, the smoldering coals were carefully raked into a pile and covered with a thick layer of wood ash. The ash severely restricted oxygen access, causing the coals to smolder slowly until morning. In the morning, the housewife had only to carefully fan them and toss in a handful of fresh, dry firewood.
Thus, the fire lived in a single home for decades, passed down as a precious inheritance.
Special clay or copper caps were used to reliably cover these precious coals. In old chronicles, this process was called preserving the seat of fire. It sounds very poetic, but in reality it was a purely technical and vital necessity. If the seed of fire suddenly died out, the house quickly turned into an icy and gloomy crypt. Neighbors could share a burning log, but going out into the frost to fetch it was a dubious pleasure. In peasant homes without a constant fire, the temperature would drop to street level in literally just 1 hour. The stone walls of nightly castles froze even faster, acting as giant natural refrigerators. Windows in those days were tiny and were often covered only with a bull's bladder instead of expensive glass. Therefore, the crucial duty of tending the hearth was often shared among all able-bodied family members. Someone was bound to wake up in the middle of the night and throw a dry log on the fire in time. If the hearth did go out, the chances of surviving the night safely plummeted to critical levels. This was especially true for infants and the very elderly, whose bodies could not withstand the cold for long. Modern doctors know that insidious hypothermia creeps up completely unnoticed, precisely during sleep. A person simply falls into a deep sleep in the cold and never wakes up again. Fire was the only reliable barrier between the world of the living and the icy void.
Maintaining the eternal flame was, in fact, a sacred and honorable duty of every homemaker.
It was hard work with no days off, no vacations, and no room for even the slightest mistake. Do you often complain that you forgot to plug your phone in to charge overnight? Imagine that because of your annoying forgetfulness, you have to relight the icy stove in the morning. Meanwhile, all your loved ones will be shivering from the cold and looking at you with silent reproach. It was a daily and utterly exhausting battle against the relentless entropy of nature. Fire was the most valuable resource in the home, sometimes more important than gold, land, or sharp weapons. It provided life-saving warmth, bright light, protection from wild animals, and hot, calorie-rich food. To lose it meant almost certainly losing the battle for one's own life on this long night. We're used to changing into light pajamas before bed or sleeping completely naked. Our apartments stay a steady 20 degrees, and cotton works just fine. To a medieval person, our habit would seem like a surefire way to kill yourself. They went to bed looking as if they were setting out on a long hike. Poor people slept in exactly the same clothes they wore during the day. The idea of special sleepwear emerged much later and was reserved only for the wealthy. A peasant would simply take off his dirty boots and fall into bed, wearing woolen trousers and a shirt. Clothing was their only source of warmth.
No one could afford a separate nightgown due to the exorbitant cost of quality fabrics.
The sleeping arrangements themselves were not particularly comfortable or warm either. Often it was simply a sack of dry straw thrown onto wooden planks. The earthen floor of a peasant's house literally radiated a grave-like chill all night long. Lying close to the floor without proper insulation was deadly dangerous. Therefore, a thick layer of daytime clothing compensated for the lack of a proper warm mattress. Wool was the primary material of that era, and there was a reason for that. Wool fibers retain heat even when they get wet. And the humidity inside the huts was extremely high due to people's breath in the earthen floors. Modern extreme hikers still use merino wool for the same reason. This dense material wicks away excess moisture effectively and keeps the body from getting cold. Sleeping in clothes created several layers of insulation around the body. Air got trapped between the layers of fabric and warmed up from the skin's temperature. This is the same principle behind modern, expensive down jackets. Peasants didn't know physics, but they understood perfectly well that 3 shirts are better than 1. The space between the layers acted as a reliable, invisible shield against the biting cold. In addition to clothing, people actively used each other's natural body heat. Often, the whole family would sleep in one bed to keep warm through collective effort.
Children were placed in the middle, while adults lay at the edges to protect against drafts.
Even pets were sometimes allowed inside on the coldest nights. Dressed in wool, people and animals together created a powerful and vital source of heat. A thick bonnet or woolen hat was always worn on the head. A huge amount of precious body heat escapes through an uncovered head. Today we laugh at the funny nightcaps in old paintings, but these funny little hats literally saved people's brains from freezing. In winter, the temperature in the bedroom was often almost the same as outside. Wrapping yourself in a blanket wasn't enough, because blankets often slipped off during sleep. A draft would instantly find a bare patch of skin and draw out the heat. Clothing ensured that even if you uncovered yourself, the cold wouldn't hit you directly. It was personal armor against the icy night air. The dilapidated walls of wooden houses let strong winds through numerous small cracks. Feet were never left bare while sleeping either. Thick woolen socks or wraps were a mandatory part of winter overnight stays. Frozen feet lead to rapid cooling of all the blood in the body. Blood from cold extremities returns to the heart and critically lowers the overall body temperature. My feet start to get cold just thinking about an icy medieval field. Sleeping too close to an open fire was a huge risk. Wooden houses with thatched roofs would burst into flames instantly from any accidental spark. The hearth had to be extinguished or significantly dampened at night for fire safety. Therefore, one could not count on warmth from the stove during a long sleep. All hope rested solely on the quality of the woolen garments worn on the body. Doctors of that time even recommended not washing too often in winter. They believed that a layer of dirt and sweat provided additional protection for the body against the cold. Frequent bathing was seen as a dangerous weakening of the body's natural defenses. Skin oils did indeed create a small barrier against the icy room air. Moreover, hot water was a true luxury due to the strict conservation of firewood. Today, such medical advice seems wild and strange to us. We're used to daily hot showers and fresh bed linens. For us, the smell of an unwashed body is associated with illness and severe neglect. It sounds disgusting to modern ears, doesn't it? But when survival is at stake, aesthetics take a backseat. Modern dietitians constantly tell us, don't eat after 6 in the evening. We count calories, avoid carbs at night, and go to bed feeling slightly hungry. Medieval people would have laughed at us for such advice. For them, a hearty late dinner was the main way to survive a freezing night. The body's internal heating system runs exclusively on the calories it receives. When the temperature drops, the body needs to burn fuel to maintain a core temperature of 36.6 degrees. If the stomach is empty, the body simply has nothing to produce energy from. It begins to cool from the inside, which is fatal in a freezing cold house. That is why an empty stomach at night was tantamount to a certain death sentence. That is precisely why the winter diet was as heavy and fatty as possible. Lard, butter, thick meat soups, and porridges made from unhulled grains. These are slow-digesting carbohydrates and fats that take hours to break down. They provided a steady flow of heat all night long, acting like firewood in a stove. Such hearty food kept you feeling full for a long time and reliably warmed the sleeper from the inside. Obtaining such high-calorie food in winter was a grueling ordeal in itself. In the fall, peasants actively salted meat and stored root vegetables for the long, frosty months. Fresh vegetables or light salads simply did not exist during the cold season. All food had to provide maximum benefit and energy to combat the cold. Every scrap of precious animal fat was carefully saved for the long winter nights. Modern polar explorers and mountaineers use exactly the same strategy before bed. They eat a piece of butter or chocolate to keep from freezing in their tent. Medieval peasants intuitively discovered this method of sports nutrition. Their lives depended directly on how hearty their evening meal was. Mistakes in evening meals during those harsh times came at too high a cost. Digestion itself is a thermogenic process that generates heat. While the stomach works on a piece of lard, the body warms up slightly. It was a free internal heater that turned on automatically after a meal. Sounds like a night snacker's dream, doesn't it? The body literally converted heavy food into life-saving thermal energy. Lack of food in winter killed people faster than the cold itself. The hungry person loses their resistance and freezes several times faster than a well-fed one. In a critical situation, the body simply shuts down peripheral blood circulation in an attempt to save the internal organs. First, the fingers freeze rapidly. Then the heart can't take it anymore and stops. A full stomach served as the main shield against such a terrifying scenario. After such a hearty dinner, people tried to go to bed as quickly as possible. Firewood was very expensive, so using it for evening lighting was a real waste. The sun set early, and the peasants went to their cold beds immediately after the meal. This allowed them to retain the warmth gained from the food and not waste energy. All unnecessary activity after dinner was kept to a minimum. Beer and ale were also an important part of this evening ritual. This was not a modern light lager, but a thick, high-calorie drink resembling liquid bread. It provided extra carbohydrates and helped one fall asleep faster on a hard bed. It was a medieval energy drink, only in reverse. Drinking plain water was dangerous due to bacteria, so ale literally saved everyone.
Master brewed this himself, my lord.
It looks...
At the same time, people tried not to consume large amounts of strong alcohol before bed. Strong alcoholic beverages provide only a deceptive, short-lived sensation of warmth. Blood vessels dilate quickly, but then the heat rapidly escapes through exposed skin. Because of this, a person who has been drinking risks freezing even faster in their sleep. Mild, full-bodied ale worked differently, nourishing the body without causing sudden temperature spikes. Special attention was paid to small children and the elderly during dinner. Their metabolism was significantly slower, and they lost precious body heat more quickly while sleeping. They were given the fattest cuts of meat or an extra serving of porridge. The survival of vulnerable family members depended directly on the proper distribution of winter food supplies. Evening care took the form of a bowl of soup that was as hot and thick as possible. So their diet broke all the rules of modern fitness. But they weren't trying to fit into skinny jeans by summer. They were simply trying to survive until that summer without turning into an ice cube. Calories were not the enemy, but their only reliable ally. Ancient Rome built luxurious heated floors, creating the famous Hipparcos systems. They enjoyed warm thermal baths and a level of comfort that remains out of reach for many even today. But medieval Europe forgot these engineering marvels for centuries. Their reality became the icy, frozen earthen floors and huts. Sleeping directly on such ground was a death sentence. The earth has enormous thermal capacity and acts like a giant heat pump. It will endlessly draw heat from your body until you grow cold. You can never heat the planet, but it will easily cool you down. Any direct contact with the ground in winter guaranteed rapid hypothermia. That is why peasants were terrified of spending the night on a bare floor. The floors in simple homes were made of tightly packed mud. In summer, this provided pleasant coolness, but in winter it turned into an icy rink. Often the floor was covered with dry reeds or rushes for minimal insulation. The grasses absorbed excess moisture and softened the hard surface slightly. However, such a thin covering was completely insufficient for a safe night's sleep. Therefore, the first task was to create a barrier between the body and the ground. People built platforms out of planks, constructed high beds, or at least raised platforms. If there was no wood, they piled up huge mounds of dry straw and leaves. The point was to create a layer of air beneath them. The air cushion effectively blocked the cold coming from the depths of the frozen ground. Peasants sewed huge sacks from coarse canvas and stuffed them with plant matter. They used not only straw, but also dry husks from grain or peas. Such a rough bedding served as a makeshift mattress for the whole family. Sleeping on it was hard, but it reliably insulated people from the icy ground. The poorest simply piled hay in a corner and slept in that heap. Modern hikers know this rule from camping mats and foam pads. A sleeping bag won't help if there's no insulation between you and the ground. Medieval people used dry moss and hay instead of high-tech foam. They packed their mattresses so tightly that the cold couldn't seep through from below. This ancient survival method still works flawlessly today on any camping trip. But straw had a tendency to get damp and clump together under body weight. A damp bedding lost all its insulating properties and became cold. Therefore, the straw had to be regularly turned and replaced, which was hard work. Lazy owners quickly paid for their negligence with pneumonia. The dryness of the sleeping area was monitored just as strictly as the availability of food. In addition to the bitter cold, sleeping on the ground carried the risk of encounters with unpleasant neighbors. The straw and the earthen floor teemed with rats, mice, and insects. Rodents sought warmth and scraps of food, often climbing right onto sleeping people. A bed raised off the floor helped provide at least some protection against the bites of these pests. No one wanted to wake up to find a hungry mouse running across their face. Interestingly, wealthy lords in stone castles suffered from a similar problem. The castle's stone floor drew out heat just as effectively as damp earth. That is precisely why castle beds were made with tall, carved legs. It was not merely a matter of aesthetics, but a necessary distance from the icy stone. The higher a person's status, the farther their bed was placed from the floor. The nobility could afford to stuff their mattresses with soft bird down or feathers. Feather beds cost a fortune and were passed down through several generations. They created an ideal air pocket that warmed instantly from the body. Lying on down was not only incredibly soft, but also completely safe in winter. This was an unattainable level of luxury for ordinary working people. Wooden planks were often placed under the bed so that one's feet wouldn't be so cold upon waking. The entire architecture of the bedroom was built around protection from the cold coming up from below. The ground was always an enemy, waiting for your mistake from below. And this enemy never tired and never took a day off. The slightest breach in the defenses led to severe and often fatal illnesses. It's funny how modern people pay money to sleep on the ground in trendy eco-hotels. To a medieval person, that would have looked like a form of torture. They spent all their energy trying to get away from that cold ground. The earth was meant for the dead, and the living had to sleep higher up. Today, we often open a window at night to let in fresh air. We enjoy a slight coolness and ventilation while we sleep. For a peasant of the last century, a draft was a silent and imperceptible killer. Cold, moving air steals heat dozens of times faster than stagnant air. Beyond the fear of freezing, people felt a panic-stricken dread of the night air itself. Medicine at the time believed that diseases were transmitted through invisible poisonous vapors. It was thought that darkness brought with it deadly miasmas from swamps and graveyards. Letting the night wind into the house meant voluntarily inviting the plague or fever inside. Therefore, windows and doors were tightly shut for purely medical reasons as well. Houses of that time were built far from modern insulation standards. Walls made of wattle and daub cracked, and wooden planks dried out. The wind found every crack and whistled through the hut, blowing out precious bits of warmth. Leaving such a crack open at night meant letting death right into the room. Winter blizzards easily blew right through flimsy structures without proper preparation. Roofs, often made of straw or reeds, were a huge problem. A large opening was left in the center of such a roof to allow smoke from the hearth to escape. Proper stone chimneys were rare, so the heat quickly escaped straight into the sky. At night, this smoke hole had to be partially covered with special shields. It was a deadly balancing act between retaining heat and the risk of suffocating from smoke. So every evening began with carefully plugging every possible opening. Everything was used: old rags, bundles of straw, dry moss, and even clay. Doors were tightly wedged shut with heavy planks or sandbags. The room had to be turned into an airtight box as much as possible. Children were often tasked with walking along the walls to check for any sneaky drafts. This created a terrible problem with indoor air quality. The fire in the hearth smoked, people and animals breathed, and there was a catastrophic shortage of oxygen. In the morning, the air in the hut was thick, damp, and foul-smelling. But stale air meant life, while the fresh, frosty wind brought death. No one complained about the stuffiness. for it was the main sign of safety. All winter long, livestock often shared the same room with their owners. Cows, goats, and sheep breathed, giving off a huge amount of natural heat. Their presence turned the flimsy peasant shack into something like a living bioreactor. Of course, the smells in such a closed room were simply unbearable. However, the animals' warmth could save a family from freezing on the coldest night. In wealthy homes, four-poster beds were invented to combat drafts. The heavy velvet curtains around the bed were not merely decorative. They created a room within a room, protecting sleepers from cold drafts. When you drew the curtains, you cut yourself off from the castle's icy winds. Inside such a fabric dome, your breath quickly warmed the confined volume of air. The poor did not have expensive velvet, but they too tried to imitate this method. They hung coarse linen fabrics or old animal skins around their sleeping areas. Any barrier to the flow of air helped preserve the crumbs of precious warmth. Sometimes the bed was simply pushed into a deep niche in the wall or placed in the farthest corner. The main task was to hide from direct drafts at any cost. Windows that did not yet have glass were covered with oiled parchment or bull bladders. At night, they were additionally closed with heavy wooden shutters. Modern air conditioning seems to us the pinnacle of comfort. They would have given half their kingdom just for a sealed plastic window. Glass windows back then cost a fortune and were found only in palaces and cathedrals. Today we call this the wind chill factor. At 0 degrees, a strong wind makes the body feel like it's -10. Peasants didn't know the terms, but they felt this physics in their freezing bones. The wind blew away the warm air cocoon around the body, leaving it defenseless. It was possible to freeze to death even at slightly below freezing temperatures if a strong wind was blowing. The battle against drafts was an endless and exhausting war. The house constantly tried to let winter in, and people desperately resisted. And if you were too lazy to plug a crack with moss, winter always won. The frost shows no mercy to those who leave the door open to it. Many of us love to sleep cuddled up with our dog. For modern people, this is simply a cute habit and an emotional attachment. For people in the Middle Ages, this fluffy ball was a valuable technological device. Animals were their walking, breathing, central heating units. In poor peasant homes, the barn was often under the same roof as the living quarters. And this wasn't due to a lack of space outside. Houses were built on the principle of a long barn where people and livestock shared one large space. Only a light wooden or wicker partition was placed between them. Cows, pigs, and sheep generate a huge amount of body heat. A single large animal heats a room just as well as a small electric heater. The animals breathe, their bodies radiate energy, and the manure ferments further, releasing heat. The decomposition of straw and waste on the barn floor created a warm cushion effect. It sounds incredibly unsanitary, doesn't it? A modern health and epidemiology station would faint at the sight of such a scene. But this intense heat seeped through the partitions and warmed the sleeping people. On particularly cold nights, people even slept right next to the livestock. Peasants could move their straw mattresses closer to the cows or horses. Cattle have a massive body mass and a consistently high body temperature. Pressing one's back against a warm cow's side was a true lifesaver during severe frosts. Dogs often lay right on the beds, serving as fluffy, heavy blankets. Dogs have a higher body temperature than humans, making them ideal heat sources. Forget about expensive hot water bottles. A live dog works much more effectively. A dog instinctively seeks out the warmest spot and curls up in a ball at its owner's feet. It doesn't cool down by morning, unlike heated stones or jugs of boiling water. On the contrary, the animal will keep you warm evenly throughout the dark hours. In return, the pet also received its share of warmth from the human body. It was an absolutely mutually beneficial partnership for the sake of simple survival. Interestingly, this practice gave rise to some modern idioms. For example, the expression "night of 3 dogs" came to us from the northern peoples. It referred to a night so cold that surviving required hugging 3 dogs at once. 1 dog was enough for a light chill, 2 for severe frosts, and 3 dogs meant a critical temperature on the brink of death. A brilliant and completely free solution to the problem. Of course, such proximity brought fleas, odors, and diseases. Pets were carriers of many unpleasant parasites. Peasants were constantly itching and suffering from skin infections because of this way of life. But the choice was always between the risk of getting sick later and the risk of freezing to death right now. People always instinctively choose what kills them more slowly. The heat from a cow was reliable and guaranteed, unlike firewood that burns out quickly. Even wealthy townspeople tried to keep poultry or small livestock on the ground floors of their homes. According to the laws of physics, the warm air from the animals always rose upward into the living quarters. This created a natural floor heating system for the second-floor bedrooms. This architectural trick was widely used throughout medieval Europe. Domestic animals literally heated stone city buildings with their breath. The aristocracy did not shy away from this practice either, though in a more refined form. Ladies carried small dogs in their arms, not just for fashion's sake. Icy drafts always swept through the vast stone halls of castles. These tiny pets served as pocket warmers for frozen fingers in the cold castles. High society used dogs as modern portable hand warmers. A small dog under a wide skirt also provided excellent protection from the cold coming up from below. Special breeds of tiny lap dogs were even bred specifically for the nobility. Their main task was simply to sit on their owner's lap and provide warmth. During long church services in unheated stone cathedrals, this was a necessity. Noble ladies hid their fluffy saviors in the folds of their expensive fur cloaks. Without such living hand warmers, sitting through a mass lasting many hours in winter was physically impossible. Cats also played a vital role in people's winter survival. In addition to being excellent at catching mice in grain stores, they loved to sleep with people. A purring cat on one's chest kept the upper body warm and soothed the soul. Their thick fur served as an extra local scarf for a frozen neck. Peasants held cats in high regard and always let them into bed on the coldest nights. So the next time your cat lies down on your feet, show some respect. 1,000 years ago, this little maneuver might have saved your life. Animals didn't just feed people, they literally saved them from freezing to death. It was a perfect symbiosis, defying all rules of hygiene. We've grown accustomed to thinking of night as simply a dark time of day, illuminated by streetlights. We drive around in our cars, stroll through parks, and feel no sense of danger. In the Middle Ages, sunset meant the end of a safe world. Darkness was absolute, thick, and incredibly dangerous. Traveling in winter after sunset was an act of sheer suicide. Forest roads turned into deadly traps without the slightest source of light. In winter, daylight hours were critically short, and twilight set in very quickly. Snowdrifts distorted the familiar landscape beyond recognition. If your cart broke down a mile from the village at night, you were doomed. You couldn't fix a wheel in the dark, and standing still meant freezing to death. There were simply no signposts or cleared roads back then. The roads were nothing more than ordinary dirt ruts, often buried in deep snow. Getting lost in a blizzard was easier than easy, even in a well-known forest. Horses sank into snowdrifts and refused to go any further in the pitch-black darkness. A person found themselves face to face with the merciless winter elements. But the cold was not the only problem on the night roads. The darkness brought with it predators who were just waiting for stranded travelers. Packs of hungry wolves grew bolder in winter when food in the forest was scarce. During harsh winters, predators would come right up to human settlements in search of prey. They could see perfectly in the dark, unlike the blind and frozen people. A lone traveler without a torch or a weapon became far too easy a target. Fire was the only means of protection, but it was rarely possible to start a fire in a blizzard. Flint and tinder often became damp, and dry firewood was nowhere to be found under the snow. Frozen hands simply wouldn't obey, making it impossible to strike a life-saving spark from the stone. The wind instantly blew out the faint tongues of flame. Without a fire, a person remained completely defenseless against the night forest. Besides wolves, bandits, and marauders roamed the roads. People driven to desperation by hunger often banded together and robbed passing merchants. They did not attack during the day, when they could be spotted from a distance. Darkness was their main ally and cover. A lone traveler at night was, to them, a walking bag of free clothing. A warm jacket stripped from a victim was valued by the bandits more than gold coins. Navigating without light was physically impossible. The peasants had no compasses. The cloudy winter sky completely obscured the moon and stars, depriving them of their last points of reference. Taking the wrong path meant getting lost in the forest until morning. The dense forest muffled sounds and no one heard cries for help. and surviving until morning in a winter forest without a fire was unrealistic. People froze to death literally 100 meters from their warm homes. City streets after sunset were only slightly safer than the wild forest. There was no street lighting, and the cities plunged into primeval darkness. Latecomers could easily fall into an open ditch or freeze to death in a doorway. The city gates were locked tight at night for security reasons. Because of this, merchants who arrived late were forced to spend the night out in the open, in the freezing field. This is precisely why there was a strict law of hospitality during the winter. Denying a traveler shelter after sunset was considered tantamount to murder. The church severely punished those who left people to freeze on their doorsteps. Even the poorest families would let strangers sleep on the floor by the fire. Today, we wouldn't let a stranger into our home, but back then it was a matter of basic humanity. Turning a person away on a winter night was considered a terrible sin. Inns and monasteries began to appear along major trade routes. Monks took on the noble duty of rescuing freezing travelers. They rang bells during heavy snowstorms so that those who had lost their way could follow the sound. Specially trained monastery dogs helped search for people buried in the snow. These medieval rescue stations saved thousands of lives. Journeys were strictly planned around daylight hours, from sunrise to sunset. As soon as the sun began to set, everyone dropped what they were doing and sought shelter. Merchants tried to set out before dawn and drive their horses without long stops. The speed of travel was dictated not by distance, but by the availability of safe stops. People planned their routes so they could make it from one village to another while it was still light out. It was a life governed by the planet's strict biological clock. We lost that primal fear of the dark thanks to electricity, but as soon as you drive out onto an empty road in winter and turn off your headlights, the fear returns. Our ancestors lived in this terrifying reality every winter night, and their main rule was stay home when the sun goes down. In modern bedrooms, we scatter our things haphazardly, without a second thought about finding them. Slippers might be lying under the bed, boots standing in the far hallway. If we get thirsty at night, we'll just turn on the light and find them. In the past, losing your shoes at night in the dark meant disaster. Shoes were always taken off at the last moment and placed in a specific spot. Most often, boots were kept right next to the bed, within arm's reach. This wasn't due to the peasants' pedantic neatness. It was a harsh necessity in case of a sudden nighttime alarm. Homes were heated by open fires, and fires were the most common nighttime nightmare. Dry straw on the roof would catch fire from a stray spark in a matter of seconds. There was absolutely no time to pack. You had to grab your family and run outside. And outside in winter meant deep snow and sub-freezing temperatures. Running out into the cold barefoot was a sure way to lose your toes. Frostbite sets in astonishingly quickly if your feet come into contact with the snow. Without toes, a person became disabled, unable to work in the fields. And the inability to work meant a slow, starvation-induced death for the entire family. Besides fires, there was always the threat of a nighttime attack by bandits or wild animals. You had to jump up instantly, put on your shoes, and grab your weapon. In pitch darkness, without flashlights, it was impossible to find a boot tossed into a corner. Your life literally depended on the muscle memory of your hands. Modern soldiers and firefighters use exactly the same system for organizing their gear. They train to put on their boots in seconds, blindfolded when the alarm sounds. Medieval people practiced this military discipline every day of their lives. Your boots were your ticket to safety from a burning or under attack house. Interestingly, the boots themselves also needed to be protected from severe frost. If wet leather boots were left far from the fire, by morning they would freeze solid. It was impossible to put an icy boot on your foot without warming it up first. That's why they were placed close to the bed, where at least some warmth remained. This simple rule demanded iron discipline from every member of the family. No laziness, no exceptions, not even for the youngest children. You must always know where your boots are, because at night they become more important than all the gold in the world. In a modern city, we may go years without knowing the names of our neighbors in the stairwell. We need nothing from them except silence at night. We are completely self-sufficient. Our apartments are connected to independent networks. In the Middle Ages, it was impossible to survive alone, and the main resource was the communal fire. If your hearth went out at night or in the early morning, it was a tragedy. Starting a new fire from scratch, in the cold, with numb hands was nearly impossible. The only salvation was to go to your neighbors and ask for hot coals, and no one ever refused such a request. It was an unwritten law of survival in any medieval village. Neighbors generously shared smoldering coals, carrying them in special covered pots. A single well-stoked hearth could easily warm and keep 3 neighboring homes going. Mutual aid was not a moral choice, but a strict social contract. Today you give coals to a neighbor, and tomorrow he pulls you out of the snow. Selfishness in such conditions led to the rapid extinction of the most greedy. The village functioned as a single organism, where fire was the common lifeblood. If one cell froze, the others were obliged to come to the rescue. In the morning, you could often see children running between houses with clay pots. They carried this life-saving heat from those who had woken up earlier and preserved the fire's embers. It sounds very touching until you remember why they were doing it. They were running because their own homes were quickly turning into tombs. This tradition of sharing fire created incredibly strong social bonds within communities. You couldn't hate a person on whose hearth your children's lives depended. Fire literally united people, forcing them to stick together despite their quarrels. It was a forced friendship forged by a harsh climate. Modern technology has made us independent, but utterly disconnected. We have central heating, but we freeze in social isolation. Ancient people didn't have radiators, but they always had a neighbor with a hot pot of coals. Their survival was based on a simple principle. We either warm ourselves together or we freeze alone. It's funny how the harshest era produced the strongest examples of humanity. They didn't need training in team building or corporate ethics. The frost outside the window was the best motivator for creating the perfect team, and their team goal was simply to wake up alive the next morning. We look at these rules today and shake our heads in amazement. Sleeping in clothes, breathing in stove smoke, huddling close to cows, and fearing the dark. Our lives have become so comfortable that we take warmth for granted as a basic human right. We've forgotten that for thousands of generations before us, it was a privilege that had to be fought for every day. But if you look closely, these 10 forgotten rules were not a sign of savagery. They were a brilliant example of human adaptation to extreme conditions without technology. They used physics, thermodynamics, and biology on an intuitive level to cheat death. Every strange rule was written in blood and paid for with the lives of those who broke it. Modern science is only now, with an air of superiority, confirming what peasants knew 1,000 years ago. From insulating the ground to the principles of heat distribution in enclosed spaces. They were the engineers of their own survival in a world that sought to destroy them. And the fact that we are here today proves that their methods worked flawlessly. So tonight, when you climb into your warm bed alone, think of them. Turn on the heater, pet your dog just for the fun of it, and enjoy your comfort. Winter is no longer our enemy, but history remembers the days when it was the undisputed master of the night. Leave comments, share the video with friends, and never let your inner fire go out.